All right. Welcome to another edition of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. I am Chris Hinkle, your Blunt Force Conservative, your soon to be grandfather, husband, father, Christian, and retired FBI agent. And although it may seem like it's hyperbole, undefeated on the constitutional debate stage, I welcome all comers. We're going to go through a few things today. I sent a link out of the things that we're going to cover, and we're going to try to do this in segments. So we're doing a clips and put these things out there in short bits and stuff. I think it's going to help us with our coverage. Appreciate everybody that's taken the time to view in. We're going to cover some things, as I said, on X. We're going to go over Epstein and the MAHA stuff. In other words, the uh, the theater that occurred over in the Senate this week with with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We're going to talk about the future coming up with your representatives and some things to be aware of, to look out for, in how you can equip yourself to actually challenge your representatives on or the candidates on what they will or will not do. We're going to get into January 6th and the FBI. There's been a lot of contention out there about um, taking, having accountability of individuals in the FBI. We've had in a few weeks ago, we had about four individuals that were terminated from the FBI. Two of them, I think, were unfairly terminated. I don't know the other two. One of the individuals I know personally, and I can tell you it was an unfair termination. And I'm going to give my thoughts on that. It may hurt some feelings of some people inside the executive management, let's say the top tiers of the FBI. But, you know, sometimes tough love is the way to go. Then we're going to get into some life lessons and announcements. I've been thinking about some things here lately about how I want to comport myself out here on this social media landscape and the individuals that I connect with or connect with me. I'm going to give you some insight on how that is changing with me. It may also hurt some feelings out there, but sometimes I say if your feelings get hurt, um, get tougher feelings. And then we're going to talk about next week. So next Thursday is the 24th anniversary of September 11th terrorist attacks. And the plan is to have a guest on, and I'm going to talk to you about that guest. As I've told people on this platform and on the radio and on television, I was there on 9/11 as a young FBI agent. I did respond to the Pentagon, and I'm going to talk in detail about what that Tuesday was like, actually starting with the Monday before that. And I've got a friend of mine that's going to come on with me that was in New York, and he's going to give his perspective of what was going on up in New York and what it was like responding to uh, the Twin Towers, what we called Ground Zero. I am working on getting somebody that responded to the Shanksville, Pennsylvania site, and I will see how that goes. I had one I thought was going to be lined up, but he is unavailable. I'm going to dig and see if I can get another one in here. But let's go ahead and get into the things we were going to talk about. So we're going to start off with this. We'll start off with the MAHA stuff, which is if Mr. Producer, if you go to my shared screen, you'll see a news report out here of RFK Jr. ignites Senate battle over CDC reforms and vaccines. And I pulled up a couple of select uh, responses out there. One of those was from a guy that I do follow out there, and that's Mike Benz. And he was responding to Senator Mark Warner, who was talking about how he was trying to have make a point that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was not qualified for the position because he couldn't articulate how many deaths were attributed to COVID-19. And as someone who took the time, I just had only been retired a little over a year when all of this was going, oh, about a year when all this was going on. So I had some time on my hands, and I started digging into the uh, the numbers over here in Mississippi, and those numbers that I looked into were telling me a different story than I was seeing in the media. So, Mr. Producer, you can come back to me for right now. We'll move over, talk about some Epstein stuff in the moment. So, the way that I carried myself during that time, having just recently retired from federal government. I think I'd been retired about 10 months when all of this started kicking off, which was, what was that, right around March of 2020 is when we really started calling it COVID, and you started seeing some of the overreach of the government. And having spent a significant portion of my career working on civil rights matters, leading the civil rights program down here in Mississippi for the FBI, and being involved in some historical cases and some significant nationwide cases with civil rights. I really got a taste for it and dug into the Constitution and the FBI's handling of it and the way that the programs work. We, with the assistance of some great agents who were working with me on the squad that I was supervising, we did for a period of time. We were the top civil rights program in the FBI, not not just in the Southeast or anything like that. I'm talking metrics wise. We were the top in the FBI. We were doing things right. We were getting results. One of those results, and we'll talk about this another day. I'm going to do some digging and see if I can pull up some of the archive documents from the historical records with the FBI. But I supervised the reopening of the Mississippi burning case, and we were able to put a couple of Klansmen in prison for killing those civil rights workers back in the 60s. But that's a topic for another day. So what we're looking at now that's going on with this COVID thing, what ended up happening in Mississippi was we've got University of Mississippi Medical Center is probably the largest medical facility here in the state of Mississippi, and it covers hospitals throughout the state. And a problem that they brought upon themselves, and it wasn't the result of COVID, it was a result of mismanagement. So everybody was told that, how horrific this virus was and that everybody was in danger and you had to lock down. And of course, people overreacted, buying up all the toilet paper and the milk and the things like that, acting like they do when there's a snowstorm down here in Mississippi. And yes, we do get snowstorms. But what I observed was we weren't getting a lot of information to back up why they were looking to infringe upon our rights. And they were infringing upon our rights. There is no emergency exception in the Constitution that gives the government the right to do things like tell you where you can shop, to tell you who you can associate with, to tell you how you can comport yourself in public, to basically restrict a lot of the things in your life that you have guaranteed rights under the Constitution. The government just doesn't get to do that. And what was really disheartening at the time was looking at people that just bent to it. People were willing to give up their civil liberties, and we still haven't gotten an answer from our elected representatives. I still ask the questions when I see them, but I've seen a lot of people that kind of let that go, and you really don't need to, because the government, I can tell you, having worked in it for 33 years, uh, 20 plus of it with the FBI, and 13 of it in the military, with 5 of that being a federal agent with the military. I can tell you when the government takes a little bit of your rights, they're not so quick to try to give them back. But being a reasonable person, as I am, I gave the federal, state, and local government about 60 days to get their ill-prepared act together. And then I said, tell me what the risks are, and then I'll make a determination about how I and my family will comport. But you're not going to infringe upon my liberties. So beginning in May, I just said, I'm not going to play with this anymore. I didn't wear the mask. I didn't take the jab. I shopped exactly where I wanted to shop. I ate in restaurants where I wanted to eat. I just didn't play along with it. But I also didn't do things that will get you jacked up with law enforcement, with violating the law to make a point, excuse me, to make a point. What I ended up doing was I checked with local law enforcement, and they told me they couldn't enforce executive orders. So even though our governor was listening to our state health officer, Thomas Dobbs, and infringing upon liberties, would tell, shutting down small businesses, shutting down, like haircut places, telling kids that they couldn't go to the park and go outside, putting restrictions on how they could go to school and if they could return, if they were just in the mere presence of someone. A lot of things that they were doing was clear violations of the Constitution. I don't have any hope that we're going to hold them accountable, but you still need to do your part in asking them to reconcile that. I can tell you, if I get a chance to sit one-on-one with Tate Reeves, and I've talked to him a number of times, that's our governor here, I will ask him directly about it. So we've got people like Mark Warner trying to question him on it. What I saw, getting back to University of Mississippi Medical Center, what they did, a significant chunk of the income that they bring in is through non-elective procedures of surgeries, things like that. And they immediately shut all of those off. And when they did that, they also laid off a bunch of people. I mean, a ton of people from the hospitals. They laid them off because they felt like they didn't need those resources because they didn't have these elective procedures going on. Well, that's kind of confusing when this is supposed to be like an all hands on deck type thing. So what happens in hospitals is you have beds that are in there, bed space. Then you have available beds and you have staffed beds. So the beds that you have bed spaces for, not all of those can you use. They may not be equipped with the equipment. They may not have sheets. They may not have mattresses, things like that. Then there's staffed beds. So those are the ones that you can actually put people in. So you have to say, I have this many people working in the hospital that can also address whoever's in this room. Well, they laid off a bunch of people, so that reduced the number of staffed beds that they had available. So when they would put numbers out to say that the hospital is overwhelmed, it's at 90% capacity, I said, well, what does 90% capacity mean? Now, there were areas that you can go into. I found some databases, just doing some due diligence, and I started pulling data and looking at it. And I said, well, here's the problem you've got. You let a bunch of people go and you don't have enough people to staff the beds. If you had more people to staff these beds, you'd have more beds available and you wouldn't be at 86 to 90% capacity. Also, who are you counting in these beds? Is this all from COVID, or is it people with a flu? Is it people that have broken a leg in a car wreck? I mean, there's a lot of things that were going into that, but we didn't have anybody really asking those questions, especially in the media. I went toe to toe with one of the newspapers on the coast where I got into back and forth with one of their reporters because I called her out. She was out there trying to stir up, if it bleeds, it leads, trying to stir up this hysteria about COVID-19, and we weren't having that problem. And I think now when we look back, like up in New York, remember they ordered all those extra ventilators, they had the ship out off in the harbor. They didn't need any of it because it wasn't as dire as they had said. Now, I'm okay with preparing for the worst, but you can't keep using that preparing for the worst to circumvent liberties. You can't say you can't do this because of this. I even changed who I was dealing with for medical issues. I was having issues with my lower back. And when I was dealing with my doctor on that, this neurosurgeon, they were trying to get me to comport to all of these rules that were ridiculous that I wasn't going to comport with. Now, just down the road in Florida and over in Alabama, there weren't those restrictions. So it was amazing because I have really good insurance. I carried my insurance into retirement. It's amazing when you go to your medical provider and you tell them you're going to take your business elsewhere. That means you're also going to take your insurance elsewhere, your insurance that pays well. And I said, I don't have a problem with driving down to the Florida Panhandle or driving over to Alabama to get my medical procedures. Heck, I'm okay. I'll listen to some podcasts, some music, listen to some Beach Boys, drive over, drive back, stay with some friends. I don't have a problem with taking my business elsewhere, and that's something you ought to think about in the future. So this issue with Mark Warner trying to uh, catch RFK Jr. and that he's incompetent because he doesn't know the numbers. He doesn't know the numbers because the numbers were never correct. You can't just look at the information that Fauci and all of them pulled in because it wasn't accurate. Anybody could look at it and could tell it wasn't accurate if they took the time. The problem is there were a lot of people that were willing to be scared, willing to let the government protect them. You really need to learn to protect yourself. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about later in the life lessons. Now, with the Epstein stuff, the biggest thing that I see out there are people just wanting to put a head on a pike. There are people that are responsible. Our government was weaponized against us with the J6 stuff. I'm telling you that as a retired FBI agent. That was going on. So, but who's responsible for it? Now, it is the upper echelons of DOJ. It is the upper echelons of the FBI. How do I know this? Number one, having spent 20 years in the FBI and experienced with how things operate and dealt with DOJ. Second, some of the names that you heard in the media dealing with J6, and I'm not going to mention those names here, but they're people that I know that pushed back, that were in executive positions in the FBI, that pushed against those senior executives at DOJ and the much senior executives at the FBI. I've had the conversations that confirmed what I thought. And at some point, that person that I spoke with about this, and this person's connected to far more than J6. I'll see if I can get him on the podcast and bring him in, or we'll do a spaces. You can ask him some questions. He was pretty candid with me, but we've known each other for goodness over 25 years. We were first office agents in Washington Field, but this person rose to some pretty high levels and was involved or around and pushed back on some things that you'd be surprised about. Now, I talked about some people that were terminated. We got Brian Driscoll, which I don't know Mr. Driscoll. He came in significantly after I did in the FBI. He's about 15 or so years younger than I am. But everybody that I've talked to, I have not found one person that I've spoken with that knows Driscoll or that worked with Driscoll or for Driscoll that has had a bad thing to say about it. I don't know why he was terminated, but we need to know. I think, when you pull somebody out of a significant position in the FBI, especially a guy that was good enough that the incoming administration thought of to make the acting director of the FBI, I think we need some answers on that. And I would challenge Pam Bondi. Why was Brian Driscoll terminated? Just tell us. It doesn't, impede your case or any lawsuits or anything like that. But we should know. The other is Stephen Jensen. Now, I took a lot of heat about defending Stephen Jensen. I know the guy. We weren't friends or anything. He was an assistant special agent in charge when I was, the last 2 years I was in the FBI. I didn't work for him. I kind of worked directly for the SEC at that time with a lot of the projects and things that they asked me to take on. And a nice guy. I never heard him cuss, I never saw him get angry. And there were things that he could have gotten angry about. He just handled himself really well and he was about business. So when I heard these things that were said about him, and I got a friend of mine, John Nance, who wrote something about this, and I think he spoke on a podcast recently about Stephen Jensen. I read the testimony before the House committee, and it basically comes down to this. There's an analyst that was up in the Philadelphia area that nobody really knows, and Stephen Jensen. Now, that analyst was on a telephone call, a secure video telephone call. It's on a classified system. It's networked throughout the FBI. And according to that person's testimony, there was over 1,000 people on this call. I'm betting at least several hundred. I've not been on one where there's over 1,000 people on it, but I've been on one where there's hundreds on it. And this individual says that he heard Stephen Jensen castigate J6 defendants and that he was using profanity and ranting and raving. Well, the question I have, and this is where your Congress has failed you, where's somebody else that was on that call that heard the same thing that can corroborate what he said? Why was this guy pulled in to testify? Why not bring two or three other people that said they heard the same thing? We've not gotten that answer. As far as I know, that analyst is the only one saying it. And then you've got Stephen Jensen that offered his testimony that countered everything that that guy said. So the people that I know Stephen Jensen, that I know Stephen Jensen, I never experienced him like that at all, ever in our time in the FBI working with Stephen Jensen. This one analyst said that and got the attention of a congressman that let him testify about it. So my question is, who's telling the truth? Is it Stephen Jensen or is it this analyst? And the opposite side of that coin is if somebody's not telling, if only one of them's telling the truth, that means the other one's not telling the truth. And I think that needs to be reconciled. I think you might see some things like that, especially if that was used in his termination, that, that he overstepped his authority or did something contrary to the good order and discipline of the FBI. They better be able to produce it. I'm just saying that's what I would do. I would pull that person in that made that allegation against me in Congress. I'd get his deposition. I would make sure that it was non-ways to Sunday, and I would ask other people that were on that call. And if you can't find another person that says it, well, let's see where we go from there. So the other thing on J6 is I see a lot of calls for the street agents, and I've had these conversations with close friends of mine about the street agents that are out there executing the arrest warrants. Well, here's my comment on that. So when you're operating as a law enforcement officer, a federal law enforcement officer in the highest level law enforcement agency in the land, in the world, there is not another agency that can do what the FBI does. And you've got street agents that when you get a warrant, a search warrant, that's not the time to say, is this illegal or anything like that, because due process is already taking place. So what happens with an arrest warrant is typically it's, more often than not, it's from another division. I mean, I've had ones on my cases where we executed them on our own, but a lot of the times you get some from another division. And another person who worked the case, who has the corporate knowledge, writes an affidavit, takes that affidavit to a judge. The judge looks at it and determines whether or not there's enough probable cause that this individual that's named in the affidavit has committed a violation of federal law. And that judge is going to direct that you go get that person and bring them into custody to stand before the judge. That is the way our due process system works. It's now that if that was directed, from the upper echelons of DOJ, take it up with the upper echelons of DOJ. But when you're a street agent out there, you get a warrant and a judge says you are directed to go do this. You've got some choices. Yeah, you can say I'm not going to do it and quit and walk out the door and lose your job, and your conscience will be clear. But did you really do a good service? Is what I would ask. Would it have been better to stay inside and deal with it from the inside, to maybe have some input on how the arrest was going to be affected, whether or not there was SWAT or anything like that? You still don't get to make the decision on how it's going to be affected. That decision is made by the executive management. So if you want to call out somebody and put some heads on pikes, if you had a field office and you had a special agent in charge in that field office that was overzealous and drinking the Kool-Aid of Chris Wray up at the FBI and the people up at DOJ, Eric, well, not Eric Holder, but dealing with Merrick Garland at the FBI, drinking their Kool-Aid. Take it up with them. They make the decision. If they say it's going to be a SWAT operation, it's going to be a SWAT operation. You're not going to have you're not going to have a chance to do anything about that from the outside. Sure, you can raise some concerns. You can immediately, run over to Congress. But there's only two paths, and I have not had anybody. And I've had some attorneys contact me on this. Every year we get trained on whistleblower, how to comport yourself as a whistleblower. And there's really only two avenues. And that first avenue is you can go through your supervisory chain and lodge your complaint and work your way up in that. I've done that. I had a complaint. I worked it all the way up to the attorney general. It can be done. You can affect change from the inside. The other way is if you can't go through your supervisory chain and you have to be able to articulate that, then you can go to your congressman. But that's it. You don't get to go to the media. You don't get to throw things out there. And I see individuals that call themselves whistleblowers, and they're not. Um, Taking something to the media to try to bring the light to it, that's not a whistleblower. That's a leaker. You want to do it the right way. I'm all about the law. And I hear, I hear these individuals, the way that they talk, and I just have some questions about what are you complaining about? I've seen some of these agents that are out, the agents that, that were, well, we were complaining about COVID. Everybody was complaining about COVID. You just chose to use that as the reason that you got walked out. But it's interesting when you start asking questions about what was the reason the FBI said they walked you out, and you find out it had nothing to do with your whistleblower status. Now, I'm not going to get into some of these individuals that were reinstated. I saw I guess there were 10 or something like that. I've had interactions with a couple of them. There's one that I had a long conversation with on the phone, and I heard he was reinstated, and I think that was the right move. There's some that I don't think it's the right move, especially not how they comported themselves out on the internet. But I'm not going to waste a lot of time on them. I don't follow those individuals. I just, that's a decision that's being made by someone in the White House or in the FBI. And if they want to reinstate those individuals, that's on them. I, as a private citizen, I, as somebody who dedicated my life in the military, in the FBI, who put my life on the line a number of times, I get to render my opinion on it as well. And it's just as equal as everybody else's opinion. It's just because I was connected with the FBI, because I was an FBI agent, that people seem to take it a little more seriously. But there's some that I don't think should have been reinstated, but it's done. Let them do what they're going to do. We'll see how it plays out. It'll be interesting how a couple of those individuals that, if you go back and look at their timelines and the nasty things that they said, the doxing of current FBI agents, that there's no reason for that that's out there. It's going to be interesting, the conversations that they have if they walk back in the doors of the FBI. I think if I was working on their squad, I want to have some questions before, I was going to trust that person to guard my six. But hey, I'm not an FBI agent anymore. I'm just a private citizen. I don't think it was right, but it wasn't my decision to make. If people want to take my opinion on that and use it for whatever they want, that's fine. Again, that's probably the last I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to get into it. I know one of those individuals. He's found himself in some hot water by attacking some individuals unfairly, and I've seen that individuals. It's going to be interesting to see how some lawsuits play out. I'm just going to sit back with my popcorn on that. I really don't give a crap about that individual. He didn't spend enough time in the FBI to warrant any recognition from me. So the next thing we're going to move on to is this Epstein stuff. So, Mr. Producer, if we'll go back to my screen share, I've got a picture here of Thomas Massie. I don't know what others see in Massie. He is not a strict constitutionalist. He's not a textualist of the Constitution. I think he's a grifter. I think he's an egomaniac. I think he's someone that's a narcissist and wants the attention drawn to him. There's too many contradictions in the things that he says and does. When you see him do things, uh, especially on this Epstein thing, I thought the situation where they had the quote victims up on the Hill speaking, not naming any names, not telling us anything that we didn't already know. Um, I think he was using that as a way to attack Trump. And I was disappointed to see Marjorie Taylor Greene falling for this stuff too. Really disappointed in her. Massey, I've never cared for. I've kind of seen through his stuff. Uh, but it was a stunt. That's really all it was. You're not going to see anything come of it. It's a distraction away from the successes that Donald Trump is bringing here. We're going to see, fuel prices continue to go down. I think they're cheaper here in Mississippi than anywhere else. Um, Mr. Producer, we can come back to me for a second, and I'm going to set up this next clip. So over here in Mississippi, and I'll probably attend an event tomorrow. We have two major events here that are kind of political that I routinely attend. One of those is a thing called Grip and Grin. There's a guy, Bruce Bartley's a nice guy, that runs over here at a big country restaurant. It's an all-you-can-eat country buffet called Mama Hamil's. I know the owner well. He's a great guy. If you get a chance to come to Madison, Mississippi, and you want to get into a food coma, you need to fast for a couple of days and then come eat at Mama Hamil's. Oh my gosh. Great food, ribs, chicken livers, corn fritters, things like that. Best country vegetables you're going to put in your mouth, from peas to collard greens. It's just really good food. Great desserts as well, great service at a great price. So they have an event there called Grip and Grin. It's the first Wednesday of the month. And there's usually about 150 to 200 people that attend it routinely. We typically have some individuals in government that will come up and speak. I've offered to speak, especially with 9/11 coming up. I thought it was apropos to talk about it. Definitely going to offer it up for next year, when we hit the 25th anniversary. But we had our Lieutenant Governor, Delbert Hosemann, and this is primarily for the Mississippi people, but for my friends, especially over in Texas, and my good friend Chris Salcedo, with the things that they're dealing with their legislature over there, with their Senate and House. We have similar things going on over here in Mississippi. So Delbert Hosemann is our Lieutenant Governor. And I had a conversation with a former governor of Mississippi. I had a chance to sit down with him for a couple hours just to chat about some stuff. And I did ask him, I said, if Delbert Hosemann, if I had to put him on trial to be a Republican, would I have enough evidence to convict him? And it just caused a burst of laughter from this former governor. We have nothing but Republicans in statewide office over here in Mississippi. Your Secretary of State, Secretary of Agriculture, Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General, all the statewide offices are held by Republicans. In the Senate and the House, we have a super majority, not just a majority. We have a super majority in the House and the Senate. Yet we are a purple state when you look at legislation, and we are about 52 to 57% conservative by any measure, from National Conservative Union, Heritage for Action, Liberty Scores. You look at all of that. So it's a product of some things that I saw when I lived over in Alabama back in the 1980s, when Reagan was really on fire. Richard Shelby was one of our Democrat senators, and he switched parties. It was he and Howell Heflin were the senators at the time, and he switched parties. Doesn't mean he switched his philosophies. And I think that's what happened here in Mississippi. One of the things this governor told me was, well, it's a demographics issue. I don't think he thought I would understand it the way I did. By demographics, it meant that you had some individuals that were Democrats that because of the swing toward Republicans, especially during Reagan, and we had a hard swing during the Nixon administration, that you had some individuals that were switching parties, basically switching the moniker, but they didn't really change the way that they comport themselves. And I think that is just generation after generation has continued over here, which is why if you look at the Liberty scores of many of our representatives, we only have 4 of those, and our 2 senators, they're nothing to write home about. I think Cindy Hyde Smith may be the higher rated on her Liberty score, or national or the Heritage for Action ranking. She may be in the high 50s, but Roger Wicker, our other senator, he's in the high 40s to low 50s. And everybody thinks that we're this big, ripe red state. We're not. Um, so it's interesting. One of the things, and I'll note here before I move on to another topic, is while Lieutenant Governor Hosemann was speaking, and he's well into his 70s, I think he's still wanting to run for some other office, run for governor or re-election or something. He needs to move on. It's just time to hang it up. But he's speaking, and we really couldn't hear what he had to say. He wouldn't speak loud enough. And what little I could hear from him was nothing of note. He was talking about, what are we going to do about cell phones and schools and things like that, but not about the big issues. And Hosemann was coming off this lie. And I'll say it, it's a 100% lie that was put out by our governor, Tate Reeves. I like the guy. I think he's done some great things, but this was a lie. And Delbert Hosemann, this was a lie. And some of the media over here, we get a large radio station that covers almost the entire state. And I know some of the people that work there. They lied about it. They said that we eliminated the state income tax in Mississippi. We have not. The state income tax has not been eliminated in Mississippi. There are some benchmarks that they have to make over the next 12 years. So 2037, if they meet all of those benchmarks, then we can look at it. But it has not been eliminated. But we've had an increase in our gas tax starting every year, every July. So that's coming in. And they try to adjust it, saying, well, we're going to trade off from here to there. But in the end, you still end up paying more. It's just ridiculous. It was a bill of sale that were going on Fox News, and Fox News ate that stuff up. Mississippi, out there eliminating the state income tax. They did not. I asked the question, do I have to pay my state income tax this year? Well, yeah. Oh, okay. So it must be next year. Well, no, you got to pay it next year too. Well, when exactly do I not have to pay state income taxes anymore and deal with that? Oh, well, if everything goes well, 2037. Of course, 2037, Delbert Hosemann is going to be almost 100 years old, and he's not going to be here. And most of the people that passed that legislation aren't going to be in office to accept responsibility for it. That was the plan. So, those things are happening in other states too. You just got to call it for what it is. So that brings me to this. And if we'll go back to my share screen, Mr. Producer, this is my congressman. This is Michael Guest. Some of you may know him when he was chair of the House Ethics Committee. He was the one responsible for ousting George Santos, which got us another Democrat seat. I'm not a big fan of them being able to oust a member of Congress, especially in an election year. Allow the citizens to make the decision based on the available information that they have. But I don't need people that don't live in his district or in his state making those decisions. And that's exactly what happened. And that was led by Congressman Guest. Now, Michael's a nice guy. We're civil and cordial with each other. I've had some conversations with him. I've talked to you guys about it here on the podcast. I've talked about it on the radio, about challenging him on some things that don't comport with the citizens of Mississippi. His vote for Democrat Benny Thompson's J6 commission. I can guarantee you President Trump is not enthusiastic about that. The fact that he voted for the omnibus bill, which funded abortion, gave money to Planned Parenthood. That would be the poison pill for me. in Congress. That may be why I've been approached by so many people about running against him. And I doubt very seriously that he would debate me. It wouldn't go well. I don't think that's not being arrogant. I've talked to the guy. I don't, he's a nice guy, but he's kind of timid. Um, it, I, I can't find anything that he's actually done. So that brings me to the next thing here, some of the stuff that he's putting out on his social media. So I guess he's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee, talking about all the problems with the Biden administration and how Joe Biden was causing all these problems at the border. And you probably saw he and other representatives online, on television, and parroting the same complaints that we had about what was going on at the border with the fentanyl coming across and all of that. And then you may have seen them at hearings, engaging in theater. Hey, we impeached Mayorkas, but the Senate wouldn't take him out. You knew the Senate wasn't going to take him out, but you weren't willing to do the things that you could to affect the change, which is you have the power of the purse. Why not affect his budget? Why not pull his money back until he comports himself with the will of the people? But you didn't do that. Where were you? We had we had a majority in the House and the Senate when President Trump wasn't in office. But did we get anything done? Are we getting anything done now? That's another question I've got. And then this, which I thought was hysterical, sadly hysterical. This is when all the USAID stuff was coming out. For 4 years, President Biden was able to hide this wasteful spending from Congress and the American people. You guys have seen President Biden, right? You think he was hiding anything from anybody? Or was it that our elected representatives weren't taking the time to actually go and do their job and look for it? We allocated money to ABC agency, and we gave this money to you, and what'd you spend it on? What'd you do with it after that? You can come back to me, Mr. Producer. So I'm going to go ahead and make an announcement right now. Like I said, I've had a number of people over the past few years trying to get me to run for different offices. And a significant number of them were trying to get me to run for Congress. I just don't think it's the right time right now. I am my granddaughter, first grandchild, is scheduled to be here a week from this Tuesday. My daughter-in-law is going to be induced. So, by that time, around the 16th, is when we're going to be welcoming our first grandchild here. So I've got a lot of things going on. I've got some things that I want to do. The interest was pretty high about me doing it. I think if I jumped in, I felt confident that I would be successful in doing it. I would either be pushing Michael Guest to actually act on the will and intent of the people, or I'd take him out of office. It wasn't an issue of money. It was interesting that as soon as I started entertaining it, or maybe leaning toward it, or feeling like God was pulling me toward it, it's funny how people started coming into my orbit that could help out with that. I've got some friends now with very, very deep pockets. So the money is not the issue. I just think it's a matter of timing right now. So I'm going to keep my powder dry for right now, but pay attention to what happens in 2028. I'm still going to be relatively young. I'm 61 right now. I will, 2028, I'll be 64. Feel like I'm in pretty good shape right now. Definitely going to keep staying in shape with the granddaughter coming. So we'll see. I will still be speaking out in the media, but yeah, it would take a lot for me to jump into the race right now. But it's not because I don't think couldn't win, and it's not because I don't think I could affect change. I'm praying about it, and we're going to see which way God leads. Now that may change. Heck, I may get a call tomorrow from some individuals that really, really want me to run with some really, really deep pockets that may say go. And that would be something I'd have to entertain. And these people are very well connected to the current administration. And I'm not saying that as a hyperbole. I'm telling you for a fact they are. But we'll see how that plays out. So for right now, I'm going to kind of keep that powder dry uh, about going into politics. It's not something I really want to do, but it's like going into the military. It's something you feel called to do. The FBI was something I felt called to do since I was 6 years old when I first thought about being an FBI agent. It took me a long time to get there, and it was the best career I ever had, even with all of the problems with those idiots like Jim Comey and Robert Mueller and Chris Wray, the malfeasance that they were involved in. I did affect some change on the inside. We'll talk about that one day. I may do some little short podcast or something, break down what it was like, entering the FBI from day one, maybe break them into 5-year increments or something. But I want to get to for next week. So next week, 9/11, and it always weighs on me. I'm going to talk about this more on the podcast. We're going to do a podcast on 9/11, and Mr. Producer, if you go back to my share, this is a patch that those of us that were first responders got that were working that day. And it covers World Trade Center, Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And those were the three scenes. And it seems like yesterday. I can close my eyes and still see that it was a gorgeous Tuesday morning. But we're going to talk about that next week. And right now, I'm working on getting somebody from Shanksville, Pennsylvania here to talk about their experience at that site. I'm going to talk about the Pentagon. And my friend Jim Galliano has agreed to come on because he was at Ground Zero in New York working that scene as an agent in the New York field office. And Jim's going to give his perspective on the things that they were doing up there. I think a lot of it's going to be similar to what we were going through down in DC. And I encourage you, if you've got friends or relatives, if you've got students that if they are interested in hearing some on the ground first responder descriptions of things about working the case and responding to the scene, I highly encourage you to listen next week. We're going to go into detail. Some of it's going to be a little bit painful. We both lost friends of ours through 9/11, and we're going to talk about that. So I'll keep promoting it through the week. Mr. Producer, you can come back to me. Like I said, I've got four friends of mine. One of them was a classmate. Two of them were two of my best friends in the FBI that we've since lost to complications from our exposure at the Pentagon. And I want to tell their story. I'm going to find the letter that my classmate wrote, his final letter that was sent after he passed away, and his thoughts on his FBI career. But as we cut toward the end of this podcast, I want to talk to you about some life lessons and some changes that I'm making. I was texting back and forth with a friend of mine earlier today. And one of the things I would say is, and I said this to her, invest in those that invest in you. So if you've got individuals that you're willing to invest your time, your reputation, your connection with them, they should reciprocate in that. If they don't, then you might want to reassess why. And that might cause you to make some tough decisions. So there's some individuals that I've been going through my social media account. There's a few people, two in particular, large followers that follow me. They followed me first. It wasn't where I reached out and lobbied them to connect with me or anything like that. And I I lended my reputation and my experience to their platform and trying to promote them. One of those individuals did something that was uh, very unprofessional. And, I had followed back. I immediately unfollowed, but I still had that connection there, which meant that if someone went to that person's account, they would see that this person follows and might see my name on there. I'll give you a tip about the X platform that I learned and was able to do. I said, how can I get this person to not follow me so that my account is not associated with their account? Because I cherish my integrity and my credibility, and I don't want it associated with someone, especially someone that is unprofessional. So, what you can do is if a person follows you and you don't want them following you anymore, and you don't want to just block them, because then they can make a point out of that so and so has blocked me. Yeah, you've seen that with a number of accounts here where they pull it up. Heck, I got that one person, what's his name, Jesse Kelly, out there for some reason got a little upset because I guess I hurt his feelings. I thought Marines were supposed to be tough, but I said something online, kind of called him out about, rather than just admitting he made a mistake, he was trying to obfuscate. And he blocks me. I'm like, fine, I'll block you back. I don't have a problem with that. But if you've got somebody out there that you want to be associated with, what you can do is you go up and you block them and then let the block take effect, and then you unblock them and it removes their follow. And you're not associated with their account anymore. They have to go back and follow you again, and you would get a notification that they followed you. If this person tries to follow me again and I get a notification, I likely will send a message and say, why are you following me? I don't have anything in common with you. I don't want to be associated with you. I don't have to block you, but I don't want to be on your radar constantly where you're following me and things are popping up. So I'll probably have a hard conversation with that person. And there's some others out there that I have to assess. I have to look back and say, are they adding value, reciprocating that promotion or that value? And I've done this in my business life. So when I retired in 2019, I had been sought out for about a year by a local firm. And the firm was like, hey, come in, we want you to work here. We're going to give you this high level position. You're going to be able to bill. Here's the amount that we're going to bill for the work that you do. And we're going to get a percentage of that, of the work that you generate, about 25% of it. It was still going to be a decent payday. I talked to my wife about it, and she said, well, try it for a little while and see how it goes. And I did. And after a couple of months, I'm like, this doesn't seem like it's coming to fruition, not the professional agreement that I had with this individual. So I was meeting with a large law firm here, probably the largest one in the state, and a very high level attorney and I were talking. And she asked me, she said, why are you working for this person? You've got the knowledge, the skills, the experience. You've got the reputation. You've got the fact that you're a retired FBI agent. You have the intellectual property. And are they doing anything to help you maximize that in that business? And the longer you stay in that business, the more your intellectual property is going to become their intellectual property. You're not going to be known as Chris Hinkle, retired FBI agent with these knowledge, skills, and experience. You're going to be known as somebody that works at this company. So I thought about it, prayed about it pretty hard. And I slowly just started moving things out of my office. And then we had a very candid conversation with the individual and just told him right up front. I said, I think we're done with this. I think this experiment's over with. I don't feel like that, some of the things that we discussed are being followed through on. I'm going to move on. And I kind of left it at that. And uh, it was that day. I mean, that day I left, it was a clean break. And I moved on and I started my own business. And I don't have a large clientele, but I have a consistent, strong foundation clientele that call me when they need my expertise on something. And it's lucrative. I'm not making millions of dollars, but it is something that's consistent. It's a strong foundation. It's because I've invested putting my intellectual property, my knowledge, skills, and experience toward providing them a service. They've reciprocated with that by staying with me, and I stay with them. Now, if they started, working with other people that do what I do, I might reevaluate that, but they haven't. It's been a really good relationship. And I look for those not just in my business life, but in my personal life of how I deal with people. So I want to let you know that no matter what you do, whether you're a retired FBI agent, a teacher, if you coach baseball, little league football, or something, you have value. And that value means something. And when you give that, of yourself, there should be an appreciation for it or reciprocation. So if you're helping somebody else out, they should be able to return the favor. And if they're not, you may want to reevaluate that. Um, Another thing that I want to I want to talk to you about, and it's kind of weird. It's an anniversary. So I have my best friend in the whole world, and his name's Mark. He's a builder over in Tuscaloosa. And Mark and I've mentioned him a couple times in the podcast. We grew up dirt poor. Mark actually lived with us for about a year after his parents split up. And, we went through things where, we didn't know when we moved out after high school and we're out in the world, rooming together in an apartment, trying to, make our way in the world, figuring out what we were going to do. And there were times we didn't know if we were going to have food to eat. I mean, it was tough. Um, but we're such good friends that I can call him at any hour and he's going to answer. And it doesn't matter what I want to talk about, he's going to listen. But same thing with me to him. Now, I think a couple of podcasts ago, we played a clip from a movie with Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner, where they're two good friends, and Ben Affleck says, "Hey, I'm gonna need your help. We're gonna have to go. You can't ask me about it, and we can't talk about it after. And we're gonna do some very bad things to some very bad people." Um, and Renner responded, "Okay, whose car are we going to take? No questions whatsoever." I hope you have people like that in your life. Mark's one of those. He's actually in the first row. He's seat one in that. And 50 years ago this week is when he and I first became friends at Skyland Elementary School in the 6th grade in Miss Jackson's class. This little kid comes in from Georgia and we just hit it off. And we've been best friends ever since. But Mark is doing extremely well. He has a great work ethic. He returns telephone calls. He works as hard as he can, even though he really doesn't need to. I talked to him today. He was out playing golf, which is rare. He's usually working his tail off. Mark's a millionaire. He makes a lot of money. He's got a super nice house, and he knows a lot of people. But he is doing really, really well, and I'm so proud of him. It's like he's like my brother, and I just want to tell him happy anniversary. I'm not going to give you his last name. One day, if he wants to come on here, I'd love to have him on here and just talk about. I did ask him this. It's been a while back. I said, "When did you know you made it?" And he was very specific about the day that it happened. And I think it would be of interest to the people here about when he made it. Now, we both started out in law enforcement together. He just took a different path later on with his building business, and he's doing amazing with it. All right. So a couple of life lessons here before we sign off. Uh, Life is short. I am 61 years old now. Actually, uh, 61 and a half. So it's going by pretty fast. Uh, 50 years of having a friendship with Mark. That's, I mean, 50 years. There's a lot of people who haven't been on this earth 50 years. And he and I have been friends that long. Um, so appreciate every day. Some tips I would give you here is teach your children good work ethics. Teach them things that they can pass on to their children. Teach them to speak well. Maybe incorporate new words into the vocabulary each day. Uh, Little things like that. My mom never graduated high school. She ended up getting her associate's degree, going on to a great career in nursing, and helping start a partial is what they call it, as an outpatient treatment facility. Did really well with that. Uh, the others, don't lie. You don't have to be brutally honest, but really just don't lie. If you have an issue with somebody, get it reconciled. I tell people, if they think that I don't like them, ask me. I will tell you. And I would rather you, I would hate for you to think that I don't like you and never talk to me about it, when you could talk to me about it, we can clear it all up. Now, if I don't like you, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why. Maybe we can clear that up and then we end up liking each other. But I'm that person that I'll go directly to that person and ask them, hey, you got a problem with me? And I'm not looking to start a fight or anything like that. I'm just like, hey, do you have a problem? Is there something we work on here? But the other thing I would say, and as I've gotten older, I recommend this, is exercise, stay fit. I think I'm in pretty good shape for somebody of 61. Pretty strong. Body fat's pretty good. Um, I can, I worked out in the gym today. I push a lot more weight than a lot of other people around me, a lot of people younger than me. I'm not bragging about it. It's taken a lot of hard work. I don't recover as fast as I used to, but I'm staying consistent at it. And the other thing, and this goes for parents of men and girls and boys, teach your kids how to fight. I can't stress that enough. Teach them how to fight. Not just fighting for their rights, I mean physically fight, because it gives you some confidence and some security that if you are put into a situation, a fight for your life situation, that you've got some resources at your hand. It's not about the fighting style. If you want them to take karate, jujitsu, you want them to take Muay Thai, kickboxing, anything like that, that's fine. Teach them how to fight, and teach them that there may be a time that you've got to be willing to do something that the other person's not willing to do. It really became important when I was with the FBI, because you have times that you may have to make a decision to take someone's life, and that's an enormous responsibility. But you need that security of being able to handle yourself if you have to. Uh, there's some tips and tricks. I know we've had Rob Chadwick on here with U.S. Concealed Carry Association that's given some tips. We may talk a little bit about that with Gags, with Jim Galliano next week. What are some things that he's important to his grandchildren, passing along to his grandchildren and others. And if he feels the same way I do, that, knowing how to handle yourself is a good thing. I spend 20 to 30 minutes each day that I'm in the gym, and it's 4 to 5 days a week, just wailing on the heavy bag as hard as I can, hitting as hard as I can. I mean, just, making sure first I'm throwing the punches correctly, but hitting as hard as I can. Because if it came down to it and I've got to defend my family, can I do it? Or at least can I put forth a good fight? And that's why I would say it's important to learn that. Um, it gives you some confidence. It gives you the ability to handle yourself a little better in stressful situations. It actually brings a calming effect to me with hitting on that heavy bag. because I feel like I'm better prepared, and it's just something that relieves some stress. So just something I wanted to pass along to you. So again, we've got the Thursday episode coming up. It's 9/11. I'm going to try to promote the heck out of this thing over the next several days. The reason we're doing these podcasts earlier now, it's football season. I'm a born and bred Alabama fan. Was very disappointed in the game last Saturday. If you look over my shoulder here, over the shoulder, you'll see I placed two footballs there. Those are two of our prized possessions. The one on the bottom, standing up, um, my wife's sister, my wife's best friend at the time, played on the Alabama Crimson Tide team in 1992. And we had just got married, and she was willing to, I said, if I got an autographed football into into her hands, would she maybe get him to take it and get some autographs for me? Well, he did better than that. He took it with him to the SEC championship game against Florida in 1992, the first SEC championship team, SEC championship game. And that's all the players, including the coach, signature on that ball. So I've got everybody from that 92 team on there. Jay Barker, everybody you can think of. I got to look. I can't remember if Dabo Sweeney's name was on there or not. I think it is. The ball on the top, we got that in 2009 when I was over in Baghdad, Iraq as an interrogator. And I got a call from my wife while I was over there. She was at Nick Saban's football camp that summer, June of 2009. And she said this bald guy came and took the football from her. She doesn't know who it is. It turned out to be Jeremy Pruitt, who went on to be a defensive coordinator at Georgia. He went up and coached at University of Tennessee. I think he'd make a great defensive coordinator at Alabama right now. They got to get past whatever's keeping him from that. But he took the ball from her on that Monday morning, and he brought it back to her Wednesday afternoon. And that's all of the signatures of the 2009 national championship team. Mark Ingram, Julio Jones. It's Greg McElroy. All of them are on that 2009 national championship team. Their signatures are on there. And we got it in June before they even made the championship run. So that's a prized possession there. We've got some other autographed footballs upstairs, a bunch of things with Nick Saban's signature on it. Got some other posters and things have been autographed by friends that were on that 92 team. But yeah, that's just wanted to talk to you about that, about that being over my shoulder there. We're going to do some decorations here. We're going to restructure some things in the back, do some better lighting or something. So you're not just seeing my business office here, since we're getting more and more into this podcast. But thanks so much for tuning in. Tell your friends about it. This thing's available for replay on X, on YouTube. Follow us there, like it, share it with others. Pass the word about the 9/11 podcast that we're going to do. We'll try to figure out a way that people can forward us questions. If you ever had any questions about anything about 9/11, I've cleared up some misconceptions, even from some very, very knowledgeable and experienced people in national security and stuff, about, was it a plane? Was it, missiles that hit the Pentagon? About the hijackers. I'll talk a little bit about some things that, we were doing investigative wise there. I think it'll be really interesting. It's going to be something that we need to pass along, this information. The majority of the FBI agents now in the FBI weren't there on 9/11. Some of them weren't born, and that's striking. And it really affects how you look at things. And Jim and I are going to talk about that. Could the FBI today rally the way that we did that Tuesday? You'll get your answer on on Thursday. But if you've got questions, please forward them. You can DM me. You can, or put them in the comments block on YouTube or here on X, and we'll see about addressing them. I'm going to work on getting somebody from Shanksville on here too. But right now, it's looking like me and Jim Galliano. So mark your calendars. Next Thursday, 9/11, you're going to have at least two FBI agents that were heavily involved in the investigation, the recovery efforts, and the things on 9/11, 2001. And I think it's going to be some must-hear podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. I am Chris Hinkle, your blunt force conservative. Less than 2 weeks, grandpa time. And I can't wait to tell you about that. I'll probably have a smile that I can't pry off of my face. Thanks also to my producer brother-in-law, Chris Allen, who's on the other side of the computer here that's making all this happen. And we will see you next time on the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. Thank you.